The chipped mug warmed my hand, but the lukewarm coffee did little to thaw the ice forming in my veins. I stared out at the pre-dawn gray, the city lights still twinkling like mocking eyes. She wasn't home again. This time, it wasn't a late night at the office, a girl's night out, or one of her restless strolls through the city. This time I knew. The gut feeling, the whispered phone calls, the way she avoided my gaze, they had all come together into a sickening certainty. Amelia, my wife of 10 years, was having an affair. A month ago, I hired a private investigator. The suspicion had been gnawing at me, growing stronger until I couldn't ignore it anymore. Yesterday, he delivered his report, crisp photos, exact times and locations, and even the name of the man. Jace Ashton. Her colleague. The one with the slicked-back hair and the laugh that grated on my nerves. They had been meeting at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Room 602. My first reaction was a primal roar, a need to break something, anything. But the cold fury that followed was stronger. Sharper. I wouldn't be a cliché, a betrayed husband throwing a tantrum. No, I would be calculated. Precise. I would dismantle their little fantasy piece by piece. I poured the rest of the coffee down the drain, its bitterness matching the bile rising in my throat. It was time. The Grand Meridian's opulent lobby was a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I approached the front desk. "Room service," I said, my voice steady. The young man behind the desk smiled politely. "Certainly, sir. What would you like to send up?" My smile was colder than the marble floor beneath me. "A single red rose," I said. "And a handwritten note." I handed him a small, folded piece of paper. 4 words. That's all it took. "I know about Jace." I paid, tipped generously, and retreated to the lobby bar, ordering a stiff drink. The wait was agonizing. Every tick of the clock stretched the tension tighter. Then, after 15 minutes, I saw it. A flurry of movement at the elevators. Amelia and Jace stormed out, their faces pale, eyes darting like trapped animals. They hadn't even bothered to check out. I finished my drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass. A small, satisfying sound in the otherwise quiet room. I followed them out, keeping a discreet distance. They hailed a cab, their hurried whispers barely audible above the hum of the city. I trailed them in my own car, like a predator stalking its prey. They arrived at Jace's apartment, a sleek, modern building in the uptown district. I parked across the street, watching the city lights reflect in my cold, passive eyes. I waited. The confrontation came the next day at Amelia's office. I timed it perfectly, arriving just as she and Jace were returning from lunch, their faces still showing the strain from the night before. I walked straight toward them, my footsteps echoing through the silent office corridor. "Amelia," I said, my voice sharp, cutting through the air like glass. Heads turned. Whispers rippled. Amelia froze, the color draining from her face. Jace, ever the smooth talker, stepped in front of her, trying to brush me off. "This is a private matter," he said. I didn't let him finish. With a single swift punch to his jaw, he staggered back, clutching his face in surprise. The whispers turned into gasps. "Private?" I laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. "You think sneaking around behind my back, in my bed, is private?" Amelia was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "Let's talk about this somewhere else." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "It's over." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the aftermath of their deceit, their colleagues' curious stares burning into their backs. The divorce was messy, prolonged, and emotionally draining. Amelia tried to apologize, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but the damage was done. The trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage was shattered beyond repair. Jace, predictably, denied everything. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that Amelia had misinterpreted his friendly gestures. His colleagues, however, weren't fooled. The whispers continued, the sidelong glances, the subtle exclusion. His carefully cultivated reputation was tarnished, perhaps irrevocably. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I sold our house, the one we'd chosen together, filled with both sweet and bitter memories. I moved into a smaller apartment, a fresh start in a new neighborhood. I took up painting again, a passion I had abandoned years ago. The pain lingered, a dull ache in my chest, but slowly, gradually, it began to fade. It was replaced by a quiet resolve. I hadn't emerged unscathed, but I was stronger now, more resilient. I had faced the darkness, stared it down, and walked away. One rainy afternoon, months after the dust had settled, I was sitting in a coffee shop, sketching in my notebook when I saw her. Amelia. She was sitting alone at a table near the window, her face pale and drawn, her eyes empty of the usual sparkle. She looked older, wearier. Our eyes met for a moment. We just stared at each other, the weight of years of shared history hanging between us. Then she looked away, her gaze turning to the rain on the window. I closed my notebook, paid for my coffee, and walked out. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. The story was over and I was finally free.